purple party people at? Where they at? Get down. And welcome to episode 103 of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast about the music and artistry of Prince, and the number one podcast about the time. And returning to co-host is the international funk soloist of mystery, Mr. Walter Johnson. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know how mysterious I am with a first and last name, but I think my cover is blown now. No longer a mystery. No longer a mystery. So,
well, Mr. Wayne,
no, it's all good. I gotta give you trouble, positive trouble. So it's all good. It is all love.
Yeah,
no, thank you. But thank you. I really appreciate you having me back. I really do.
Anytime. So we're going to start off the show, dive right into our topics. This is an episode about the time, but there was a little bit of information that came my way this morning via a fan on the Twitter community. In response to an Instagram post that the actress Troy Bair posted in regards to the Prince documentary for Netflix. And for those that aren't familiar with Troy Bair, before there was a Halle Berry, there was Troy Bair. And I'm going to quickly run down the resume. For us in the Prince community, we know her from the Sexy MF video. Now, Walter, remember you bought that Madhouse single just for the cover with Maneka Leitner?
Oh, yeah.
I'm in the record store and there's the Sexy MF video. Now, never seen the video, never heard the song, didn't even have the cassette single or anything yet. Album wasn't out yet, nothing. See the Sexy MF video in the store, like, what's this? Okay, plop down a few dollars, picked it up, brought it home, popped it in the VHS VCR player. Whew, man. Da, 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 da. So for the Prince fans, that's everybody's familiarity or possibly introduction to Troy Bair, but she has been in movies such as The Cotton Club. She's been in The Five Heartbeats, Weekend at Bernie's. Let's see, The Gingerbread Man. She's also an accomplished screenwriter, director. One thing I just found out, and this is a movie I've seen, Love Don't Cost a Thing. She wrote and directed that. She also wrote the screenplay for Baps, although she's not happy with the way that script turned out because they kept interfering with it. But she was credited as a screenwriter for that film too. But also, again, Prince Community, the Sexy MF video. Also heard that she is also the inspiration for Shockadelica. Yeah, I can't remember the source for that, but I don't know. That stuck out. I don't know. It might have been the hits and the B-sides, probably the liner notes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I might have to double check that. But getting back to her post about the Prince documentary, let me pull up my notes here. So she made a post on Instagram recently saying that for the record, and before you hear anything from anywhere else, I chose not to participate in the Netflix documentary about Prince because I know him well enough to know that my choice not to discuss our sacred years together would have been his choice too. That's all I will ever have to say about that. Okay, so that's her Instagram post. And someone in the fan community reached out and made the comment. Of course, and this is a quote. I won't put this person's name out there. I did ask if I can make this a topic of the show, so I didn't hear a response. So I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but but I guess the inquiry was that saying that I appreciate you and your reasons always. I just hope that whatever is being produced does the man justice for such a large streaming platform in regards to his art and creativity, not his personal life. So Troy did respond, and her response was, I have been meeting with the producers for nearly 2.5 years now to review vault content and other things. And in my experience, for sure, they had Prince's best interests at heart and only wanted to portray him in the best light possible. I pray that remains their truth and intention. Okay, so Troy, as far as my realm of knowledge, this is probably the fourth person within the Prince community that has spoken publicly, at least on social media platforms anyway, but spoken publicly about the Prince documentary and kind of gives a little bit of insight on what the narrative of this documentary is going to lead to. So, if anybody remembers a year before, we had Cat Glover, who kind of started things off by relating a negative experience she had with the producers. But they in turn reached back out to her, and I think some things were worked out. And I believe she is still participating or agreed to come back to participate. So if anybody has any information, please correct me in the comments. We also have heard from Jill Jones, and there was one other person involved. I can't remember the other person involved, but both of them had nothing but good things to say about their experience working with the Prince documentary. So either positive or negative, it does sound like they are going to handle this documentary in a very professional manner. Hopefully, they'll have a more balanced opinion or have a balanced narrative. Hopefully, it won't be too biased, either, so positive that it's not afraid to tackle tough subjects, but also at the same time, not make it a sensationalist piece or anything that would slander his name or memory on that. So, Mr. Johnson, having heard this bit of news today, what are your thoughts on Troy Bayer not participating in the Prince documentary?
Well, I mean, after listening to, after you read her comments, I respect Troy for that. She said that she and Prince, she felt that that would violate the trust between she and Prince because um, there was like a verbal contract. And there's things he probably shared with her, and he told her, please don't share this with anyone else. And that shows the type of character that Troy is. I mean, that's a very powerful character trait because it's so odd that there's things I've shared with people and I told them don't share this with anyone, and guess what? They shared with other people because it was just something that, because obviously people will look at Prince in a light of they will put him on this pedestal where he can't do any wrong. And that's really unfair to Prince to a certain degree because no person on this planet should be put in place upon a pedestal to almost like a godlike status where they can't make a mistake. You know, when you're in the limelight and you people are hanging off every word that you say, and I think that's one thing that we all who's listening to this podcast now, one thing that we can all agree with is that we've said some things that in hindsight, which is 2020, I wish I would not have said that, or maybe I wish I would have said it this way. But we, one of the beautiful things about us as private citizens, maybe there's only like a small group of people that maybe heard what we said, and it may not go outside that circle. So when you're looking at, someone with a status with Prince, and for Troy to say, because obviously a lot of fans are like, oh, Troy, what are you keeping from his fans? What are you keeping from his fans? But there's going to be certain elements that Prince wants to just kind of keep to himself, or maybe he felt close enough to Troy to say, well, I trust you and I feel really close to you. I'm going to share this with you. And for her to say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to not share certain things. I have like the utmost respect for her. That is the utmost. I respect her so much. Now, also on the flip side, you mentioned something earlier when you said like the tough questions, and this is where to reiterate what I said before, that there should be caution when we place these celebrities on a pedestal. Sometimes we got to ask those hard questions so we can kind of bring them down to more of a human level and allow our artists or allow our idols to make these mistakes. We have to allow them to be human. I mean, and ask some. I think we need to ask some of those hard questions per se, for some, because right now we know there's millions of people who have Prince on the pedestal. He could do no wrong. Well, to a certain degree, yeah, he can do some wrong because he's human, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with quote unquote doing something wrong. But what happens is that you have to learn to be able to grow from anything that you have done wrong, for you to recognize and say, hey, you know what? I was not my best version of myself. So I'm going to take this situation and I'm going to grow from this situation. And I think we should allow every single person on this planet. Now, the only problem is that if that person continues making the same mistake because they're up on a pedestal, they're going to feel like they got free reign. Now, granted, Prince is no longer with us in this plane of reality. So I think some certain hard questions should be asked, but I think the focus really should be more or less on the positivity and the music and his artistry, more so because we got to know Prince as an artist, and this is how we know Prince as an artist. We don't know Prince as, the guy that lives down the street who grew his hair really long and he played musical instruments with his other guys. We knew his artistry. This is how Prince was able to communicate with the rest of the world. And I think they need to stay on that vein, but at the same time, you need to have some realism, if you will. We need to have the realism in there where we're not so with the rosy colored shades on and say, guess what? Every day was not sunshine. Every day was not flowers and rainbow. Every day was not Paisley Park,
Yep.
And
Every day wasn't a yellow day.
Right. Every day wasn't a yellow day or a purple day for that matter.
Right.
And, because that's life. Because every day is not going to be the best day. But sometimes you can look in those bad days and still find, the good within it. And like I told you earlier, no one's ever injured their eyesight by looking at the bright side of things. So when you're watching this documentary, it's best to have an open mind and appreciate. And this is true balance, where you're able to appreciate the good with the bad. Because this is what life is all about. One thing I can guarantee everyone can say on this podcast is that someone treated them like crap, someone treated them bad. But the beautiful thing about life is able to take the good with the bad, but to thrive from the good and know that, that was bad, but I'm going to be okay. This situation, it made me better and not bitter. So those are my thoughts. I applaud Troy for that. I really do, because it really feels good when you share something with someone and you're like, please don't tell this to anyone, and they hold that secret. And that says a lot about her character. And she's not out trying, to get any kind of fame or any kind of clout. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. All right. It's very, very good points, man. I mean, I know we were having a heavy discussion about all this prior to the show, and just what you touched on about putting them on a pedestal. In like one of the things you were talking about in ancient times, artists were more part of the community. It was a function of society. Their job was always to not only entertain, but, reflect the cultural values of a society.
Right.
And, you know, money as we know it didn't exist in those days. You know, there was more, I guess, harmony amongst human beings in some ancient cultures.
Right.
But as the economic state as we understand it now, as it evolved from wherever, ancient Greece on down to today, you know, and especially with the 20th and 21st centuries, once the motion picture was invented, once the record album was invented,
Hmm.
or radio, television, then that sort of shift to put artists on that pedestal. And one of the great things you said is that now we have these people in our homes
Right.
every single day. We play the records
Right.
every single day,
Exactly.
and that enters our subconscious.
Hmm.
And when that penetrates our subconscious, it's like we feel, and this was great what you said too, that we feel we know them,
Right.
like they live practically next door to us, or they talk
Right.
to us every day. Like Prince calls and says, "Hey, Rich man, what's going on?" Nothing, Prince man. What you doing today? You know,
Right. Exactly. Yeah, 40 million
and
people. He's calling 40 million people's every 40 million people every morning and say, "Hey, how you doing?"
right, and all he's doing, you know, whether it's Prince, you know, whether it's Elvis, whether it's Michael Jackson, they're sharing their art with us. This is
Right.
what they felt they were born to do,
Right.
and we take a, you know, we take a great pleasure in that, whether it's just pleasure for pleasure's sake, or if we're going through a rough time, that person's music or that person's movie or whatever makes us feel better about who we are, or it
Right.
may inspire us to do something.
Hmm.
But again, there are some people, and even Prince has commented, where the word fan comes from fanatic,
Yep.
and it kind of takes on a whole another life like that. And I don't know, when it comes to the documentary, for the most part, I think Troy, that was a very classy way to put it. She felt like that it was something that was violating either, you know, maybe not just Prince, but her and Prince's personal relationship, you know, which at the end of the day is none of our business.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
I mean, we live in a world where it's like we always have to know everything. You know, we always have to find the dirt.
Right.
But in some situations, in this case, she chose not to participate because she felt that this may violate a certain trust or certain pact. And all of them that we've heard from so far, you know, whether it's Troy, whether it's Jill, whether it's Kat, you know, they all have had valid reasons to be for or against certain things about it. But props to Netflix to reach out to Kat to kind of clear up misunderstandings. And for the most part, to take away from everybody else so far that has spoken publicly that it sounds like they're going to pay more attention to celebrating his life, his art, whatever messages, hopefully, you know, whether it's the fight for independence, creative control, hopefully those things will come through. Um, I've seen two, or I should say, two documentaries come to mind that are on Netflix. One is the Black Godfather, which is about Clarence Avant, and the other is the Two Killings of Sam Cooke. You know, and both are very powerful and inspiring. But the difference is, while, you know, Clarence Avant is, as far as I know, he's still with us. You know, he's still walking the planet, but he has done a lot of things for a lot of artists, you know, Jam and Lewis especially.
Hmm.
And that documentary, it's inspiring. And then you also have Sam Cooke, who was kind of along the lines at a certain point in his career, trying to accomplish the same things that Clarence Avant managed to accomplish and take to a very high level. But the circumstances surrounding his death, yeah, it's something to be examined, to, you know, it's something to look at, and it is something to question. But in that particular case, you are talking about an actual murder that took place.
Right.
Where with Prince, it's, some people believe he was murdered, some people believe something different. And while we won't go into those specifics, we'll just say that we feel that the Netflix documentary, while it may ask some of the hard questions, or you can't avoid that topic because unfortunately that is sort of the end of the story. Just, hopefully it's treated with respect, and that any questions can come organically from it. If somebody needs to re-examine something, hopefully organically it can come through and not something that's forced, or something that's going to force people to try to tune in and watch just for that payoff and miss the whole point of everything else.
Right.
So I don't know. We will see. We will keep a close eye on this documentary. I know I'm excited to see it when it does come out. And so far it's nothing but good things. And again, props to the people that have been involved that, like I said, for or against, they're treating Netflix with dignity and respect. And like I said, hopefully we'll get a pretty good product out of it, and we will see. So, but what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on this topic. And that's going to wrap that up. And now we are going to talk about the time. And what started off this topic on the time was their post on October 18th of 2021, acknowledging the actually 10-year anniversary of the album Condensate. It's a reunion album, but it wasn't a reunion album. It's like it's the time, but they couldn't use the name. And, in a kind of acknowledging that at the end of the year, when just a few months prior, we've had the release of the debut album of the time, because that anniversary release date, that's 40 years of the time. And, that reissue, it did come with some controversy initially, because when it was announced that this album was dropping in July, Morris got on social media and expressed his complete dissatisfaction with what was going on. But it forced Rhino Records to, or, I guess Day put his management team on the case, and Rhino Records had no choice but to listen to Morris. So hopefully going forward, when there's hopefully an anniversary reissue of What Time Is It, we'll get some bonus stuff. Maybe hopefully a concert DVD. Um, I know that there is footage that exists. It was shot the same night as the concert in Houston, the Triple Threat Tour. Was professionally filmed in Houston. We got Prince's portion on the 1999 Super Deluxe Edition. Um, if you bought that, the DVD comes with that. So we know that Vanity Six set was filmed the same way. We know the time was filmed the same way. So hey, can we get a time DVD with that? What time is it reissue? I guess we'll have to wait till 2022 to find out. But all this, we got Condensate's anniversary, the time itself. So before this year is over with, thought we'd go ahead and let's acknowledge the original seven. And a lot of the other members too. They, Morris Day and the time, this current lineup, they're still exciting. I can't wait till they come here because I haven't seen them in a while. But we're going to talk about some memories and opinions, and examine some issues, reissues, stuff that we want to see come out. So let's start diving into it. And I guess we'll start with the debut album, The Time, which was released in July of 1981.
Wow.
And yeah. And I don't know, my personal memories, I remember hearing Get It Up. I remember hearing Cool on the radio, and I guess I missed the episode of Soul Train that they were on, so I never got to see what they looked like or what the concept was. To me, I just thought like, okay, this is going to be another band, like the Commodores, or like Earth, Wind and Fire, or like Zap, or whoever, just a big, huge band, Cameo before they kind of slimmed down members. And at some point, I guess when I finally saw the album cover, or I saw them in Right On magazine or something, and I'm like, wow, this is different. Okay, it's like a small band. It's like like the rock and roll bands, like the Stones or the Who, or that, where it's just a self-contained band. It's just those guys. There's no 50-piece horn section in the back. It's just these cats, and they playing funk. They playing a little new wave, a little rock. Here they got heavy guitar solos, some funky rhythms going on, and I'm like, okay. And I think by the time the third single dropped, I'm like, yeah, I gotta have this album. So I ended up getting it as a birthday present. Props to my Aunt Mary and Uncle Dennis for the hookup on that, because I got that. Was it Lakeside, Your Wish Is My Command, and Shalimar's Friends album. Yeah, that birthday was in the house that year. So that set the stage for, oh man, we have to have a 3, 4, 5 hour show to just document the time's influence on me, on Walter, to a lot of you listeners out there. But that's sort of the beginning for me with that. So Walter, what was your first introduction to the time, or your first introduction to this album?
Oh, let's see. Similar to yours, I think it was Cool. I think I heard on the radio. I don't know if I ever heard Get It Up on the radio. I could have. But somehow I remember hearing Cool. And just the way, the keyboards and the synthesizer, just, the way the synths were, the dun, 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 dun. It was like, wow, what is this? Are you listening to, the things that he's saying? And it's so funny because even Morris says, hey, when I was saying those lyrics, I had only $5 in my pocket, and he's talking about Lear jets and penthouses, and
right.
I can barely, afford to even buy myself a meal. But, it was, now in hindsight, as I said earlier, it's 2020, to a certain degree, he was manifesting and didn't realize he was manifesting. But, but he saw himself at a certain image, and you listen to this and it's cool. And then the background singers, they spelling out the word cool, as if we know how to spell it. But just in case for those who may be like, challenged when it comes to spelling. And I remember hearing it on the radio, and I didn't know they were even remotely related to anything that was with Prince. Because you're thinking back in 1981, 1982, so that would have been during right around was 1999 coming out around that time?
No, Controversy.
Controversy was out, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Controversy out, and you're hearing Do Me Baby and Controversy on the radio. I didn't realize that these guys were even related to Prince because obviously they did not sound like Prince, but I remember it was just really a catchy tune, catchy beat, and I really didn't get the album, I think, until after I met you. I really wasn't it was kind of weird. I really wasn't that much into albums. I would listen to the radio, and my little radio that I had in my room had a cassette, and I could like record like when the song would come up. I wouldn't get the first 45 seconds because the DJ would talk over it. I'm like, dude, stop talking so I get the song. And I would have to sit there and immediately like stop the recording because they would just segue to another song or a commercial. And that's pretty much how I got my music. My parents really didn't. I don't know. I love my parents, so I don't. They really didn't buy me a lot of albums and things like that. They were just they just gave me other things, and given at the time, we really didn't have a lot of money, so it was kind of like I didn't. Yeah, it was financial. There's a financial aspect to it, but when you're right, when I first saw these guys, I was like, oh, these are this is the time. This is what these you're right. These are what these guys look like, and here are And I'm looking at the album cover now. You got this black and white album, and you got these six guys, and they look kind of hardcore. I'm like, oh, okay, they look like these
Yeah,
dudes.
that was
No, it's no
that was
Prince.
hardcore for them.
Right. I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can take Prince in the fight, but these six dudes, I don't know. I may have to cross some back up with these guys. With Prince, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I can take him. But I'm looking at these guys like, oh, these guys, they to me, they did not fit the Prince mold. Prince was,
Right.
I mean, there's only one Prince. There can only be just one Prince. Prince was a very unique individual, and what the way Prince was able to market and present himself in that way was just, it's just an awesome thing. And then here you got the time, which is almost like a polar opposite of what Prince is, because I mean, Prince, androgynous, yeah, to a certain degree, but at the same time, women liked it, and the guys were kind of secretly like, well, we kind of want to be like you because you get all the girls. But I can't wear that kind of outfit, dude. I can't wear.
Right.
I can't run around like in thigh high boots and bikini underwear with a raincoat. I can't do that and get girls. They'll look at me like a creeper. But you can pull it off and you're good. But you look at the time like, well, yeah, I can kind of dress like this and probably pull a girl or two. And so you kind of identify on the social level to a certain degree when you look at these guys and say, hey, okay, well, they're not running around like in G-string bikinis and thigh high boots. They have on Stacey Adams and baggies and the pencil thin ties. They're kind of clean. You're like, yeah. Kind of, they have their own image.
Yeah, and it was sort of similar because, like I said, here it's 81, so we're kind of past, for us anyway, past freshman year, going into sophomore year. And then when you kind of looked at I would say more so the seniors than anything at that time period, where they were already reflecting that anyway. I think even slightly before the time, because the sort of the pleated slacks, the baggies were starting to come in. And I think whether it was Prince that came up with the concept or whether it was Prince and Morris, to have sort of that instinct to say, okay, this is the direction that they should move in. Let's hit the thrift shop. Let's get these kind of like 1940s, 50s style clothes, and that's going to be the look and the image. Where like I said, some of the older cats, even in a more modern fashion, was already emulating that. And that was, I know for me, kind of one of the things to look up to, because you never wanted to really be a freshman or a sophomore. It's like you wanted to distance yourself from that as quickly as possible in those days. And just to kind of not be so under a microscope. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, cool. I got the cool clothes too. I can roll like that too.
Right.
And it was economical. So I think, yeah, they were definitely an influence that way. And I would say even before music, because I mean, I was playing a little bit of guitar, a little bit, and maybe thinking I could write a song or something, but I didn't think about like bands or anything like that with the first album so much. I know it was like, our realm was really just comic books at that point.
Right.
And, music was something I liked. I liked buying records and stuff, but, it was never a thing of, oh, I want to put a band together or anything like that. But I would say maybe kind of as that album was starting to wind down, say between that and What Time Is It, maybe kind of the seeds of, well, what can I do musically? They look like they're having a lot of fun doing it. So, so what is this music thing here? Maybe I should take this guitar a little bit more seriously now.
Right.
And do it. So I don't know. So that was kind of my thing. I don't know. Did you have that same feeling with that, or?
No, and I'll admit that, before you came along, I mean, there was some interest in music because you remember I was quote unquote the keyboardist. So there was always some interest in music. I remember as a child, my parents they bought me like a little Casio type, like keyboard. And then I had something similar. There was almost like a little organ. It had these different organ sounds, and basically I had to kind of teach myself as far as back in those days we didn't have the internet. I couldn't Google, what these keys meant. Like this is
Right.
C, this is C sharp, and this is D, and things like that. But I
So you
think
had to go buy books, folks.
and I would say it
Or
was
go to the library and borrow books.
right barber books, and I would say it was you because it was you really opened my eyes up to a lot of things because even though I listened to the music, I was more or less a fan, and when I got into albums and you were telling me like, well, yeah, look at here are the lyrics and I mean, you have to understand when you listen to this kind of music on the radio, I mean, you're lucky just to get the chorus correct. And then you know how people are. I mean, you listen to, the first verse and sometimes you're making up words. And I remember, I think you showed me like the lyric sheet. I'm like, oh, he says that. Oh, all this time he said this, and I've been singing it this way, And which is so funny because when you have that enlightenment, it changes the whole vibe of the song. Because sometimes, you make up a word, and you're like, I don't know why he says tomato. And then you look at the lyrics like, oh, it was a bomb beat or something. You're like, oh, he says bomb beat, not tomato. Okay. So, but I think after when you kind of introduced me as far as, music, and then my perspective changed at that point because I was more, of a consumer as it were. So I started listening more. I started dissecting the music because you got to help me with that as far as like, hey, listen to that bass line. And then now when I listen to the music, I can immediately pick out that bass. Listen to the way those keyboards come in, listen to those horns, look at those synths, and listen, there's the rhythm, and then here's the lead. You got the rhythm in the background, the rhythm guitar in the background, and then boom, there's the lead. I'm like, wow, okay, this guy's doing lead and rhythm. All right, because there's not two guitarists. Yeah. So he's switching around on pedals, and he's just like, wow, that guy's really good. So I would say that because of you really helped me to really expand my awareness when it comes to music. So at that point, yeah, it was like, we put a band together because you and I were really more about Prince, but obviously we can't there's no way we can wear thigh-high boots. It just not gonna happen. No. It's not gonna happen. So we kind of look at ourselves kind of like the time, but at the same time, you don't want to, as they say, imitation is the highest form of flattery, I think, is how that quote goes. But you don't want to be a carbon copy of someone else. You maybe take elements from this and take elements from that, and kind of forge your own image, your own style. But with the time, I really appreciated their look and the fact that when you listen to the music, there's really a lot of heavy guitar in it. Not and not to say anything from the previous funk bands, P Funk and just those a few names out there, the Barcades, Ohio Players. I mean, they also had guitars also, but somehow I think at the time, with Jesse, it was just a little bit more oomph. It really was just like, it was really almost focused on it, but they made it, and no pun intended, they made it sound cool. Yeah. So, and so I mean, I like that their image is something that I really enjoyed with the time. And then when I found it was so weird because I think it was you that told me that they're part of the whole Prince camp. And in my eyes, I'm thinking, you look at Prince and you're looking at Andre Simone, you're looking at Brown Mark, you're looking at Des Dickerson. They all kind of dress kind of similar to the way Prince dressed, And the time was like complete polar opposite. I'm like, this group is with Prince. And then when I listen to the rest of the album, I kind of hear like some of the influence on it. I'm like, okay, I kind of hear that quote unquote Jamie Starr influence on this album.
Right. Which, for, it's weird now because I think, anybody, say if they're a teenager now and they kind of get exposed to Prince and then, all that history is right there in front of them. So it's like, here's Prince, and Prince played all the instruments on the Time albums, or now, Prince and Morris played on the albums, so they all had, back then, like you said, at first, I don't think anybody made that connection. I think at one point, maybe as some of the cracks started to show through, I remember, I don't know, either somebody maybe had the album walking around the halls of school with it, or somebody had a Right On magazine or Black Beat magazine, and the girls are looking through it and they're all like, "Oh yeah, that's Prince's cousin." Somehow this thing where it was like Prince and Andre and Morris were all cousins. Not realizing that they were best. Before we found out they were just all best friends and they all played in the band together before Prince got famous.
Right.
But yeah, and in 1981, 82, and I don't even think as far as 83, I don't think we knew. And the genius with Prince's marketing was that on the 1999 album with DMSR, he was like, "Yeah, Jamie Starr's a thief," and we like, "Oh, whoa, this dude Jamie Starr has been ripping off Prince." But I like the time, but what's going on?
It was this Jamie Starr guy. He's like, look, if Prince doesn't like Jamie Starr, I don't like him either. If he's a thief, that's right, Prince. We don't like him either. Gonna find out he's Jamie Starr, which tongue in cheek, and and that just shows you the funny side of Prince.
Right.
But but I want to touch upon something genius. that you mentioned, like obviously, like when I saw the Time album, I assumed that these guys played everything in the studio, and of course, your average person is going to assume that because when you turn the album cover over, I think it says all their names, like Morris vocals, Jesse guitar, right. And so you assume that these people played these instruments in the studio, and that's a safe assumption because it says here that this is the keyboard. Out and you read interviews and you're like, "Oh, Prince did that." I mean, you read on the back of the album how it was like written, produced, arranged, and composed by Jamie Starr. I'm like, who in the world is this Jamie Starr? This dude did it all.
Right.
I never knew it was Prince. You just this is Jamie. Jamie Starr is just and you find out later who Jamie Starr is, and it's it's tongue in cheek. I mean, once again, your average fan is not going to know that. I like right. the music. I'm assuming that these guys that I see on the cover are the ones who played the instruments in the studio. But obviously, when they went on tour, they're the ones. Yeah, they're the ones that are actually, these guys are right. So then, of course, you're going to assume like, okay, well, if they performed this well on stage, I'm sure in the studio they did the same thing. But it's neither here nor there because I mean, you're still looking at 6 very, very talented musicians, and they really left a footprint as it were when it comes to the whole Minneapolis sound. Because I can understand what Prince was doing because in his Prince is getting his fame and he kind of wants to you have to understand and it's almost like human nature because you want to express yourself in so many different ways, and that's one of the beautiful things about life. Is that we always want to express ourselves in different ways. As us as private citizens, you want to buy maybe a new shirt, a new pair of pants, maybe a new car. I mean, however you want to express yourself in a different way. Well, musically speaking, this is how Prince was able to express himself in different ways. Like, hey, I'm going to create this group. Morris, hey, you're going to be the singer, and I think Morris said he wanted to be the drummer. He's like, dude, I don't even want to be in the limelight. Let me sit back and play drums.
Well, Alexander Neal was originally the front man, but he got a little too greedy.
I mean, it is, it just, it just right. I mean, to each his own. I mean, that's, it's weird. That's how just things happen. Is because it would have been weird had he stayed. I don't think it would have been. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say how it would have been if someone would. It's really hard to kind of say, hey, this person would have stayed. Then they would have not experienced his fame, or they could experience bigger fame. I mean, you just never know. I appreciate the way things turned out now.
Yeah,
and I appreciate these guys, and that's one of the reasons why that we always continue to buy their music. I mean, and I'm glad you reminded me as we had the conversation prior to the podcast that I've been listening to the Condensate album last couple of days, and it's like. It's so weird because I have not listened to this album. You said today is the 10th year anniversary, so it's probably about 10 years ago. I'm thinking when I listened to this, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And it's so weird listening to it now because now I'm thinking like, wow, these songs, some of these songs on here like were ahead of their time. There's one
Mhm.
called is it I think it's Hey Yo, I think. And it almost sounds like something that like T.I., the rapper, and Rihanna would do together, the way that beat flow,
Oh yeah,
was, like,
yeah,
dun,
some
on
of yeah.
eyes, dun, 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 dun. And I'm like, wow, that was way back then. But yeah, but the impact it had on me was like someone in Prince's camp, quote unquote, and I put this in quotations, someone in Prince's camp kind of looks normal, and I put that in quotations because I mean, look at the first album. You can wear that out anywhere, but come
Right.
on, you can't really wear a G-string bikini with thigh-high boots with a raincoat. You can't wear that everywhere without someone like security, that guy, you know. So, but the time you look at
Yeah.
them, hey, okay, so there's
Yeah.
someone in his camp that is not trying to look like him. There's someone in his camp that actually has their own quote unquote identity, and they're not a Prince clone. And I think that's
Mhm.
one of the things for me when you look at bands like, no disrespect to Maserati or Tamara and the Scene, but I always kind of felt like they were kind of almost like Prince clones. To me, the time, even to a certain degree, even with the family, even though their whole thing was like the silk pajamas, I don't know. The time, there's like nothing like the time. You
Well,
just,
that's it. You hit it on the head exactly. I think he realized because obviously, with Flight Time, and then you had Grand Central,
right,
they were, in heated competition, before Prince got his record deal.
right.
So once Prince made it, yeah, it was cool. It kind of took a minute, but he did reach back, because he already had Andre in, that was sort of a given. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
my best friend's gonna be there. So now here's my other best friend. Although he didn't give him an opportunity right away, he was in, proximity enough to be given an opportunity to reach back.
Right.
And yeah, and obviously he knew how talented the other fellas were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and based on Morris's recommendation and based on what Morris played for Prince, was like, yeah, Jesse Johnson is no joke on this guitar.
Right.
But I think even with all of that, he still underestimated I guess, the momentum of them becoming as close of a unit as they became, as tight of a unit, to where they always make the comparisons, the Frankenstein monster, or it became Godzilla at this point.
Well,
To
yeah, I agree with that. I think, but to a certain degree, because okay, so you touched on a couple of good points. You use, okay, the adjective heated competition, which is, anything dealing, when you're dealing with competition, you're dealing with passion that comes from the heart,
mm,
and which is a good thing because the cool thing about competition is that it helps you to step your game up to the next level. So that
right,
means you cannot put out a subpar product. If I'm in quote unquote heated competition with someone, I got to bring my A game because that person is bringing their A game. And to a certain degree, if you are grounded enough not to hate the other person, because it's all about you. You, technically speaking, you may say that person your competition, but technically speaking, your own competition because you're raising yourself up to the next level. And I think with Prince, to a certain degree, and I think this is the reason why he held such a tight grip over them, is to a certain degree he didn't want them to be bigger than him. He goes like,
yeah,
hey, hey,
exactly,
it's like, hey, I got this, guys. I'm gonna write all the songs. I'm gonna play all the instrument, and you guys can just get out there and promote it. But I got to let me have the studio. I'm gonna do this because da da da. And they're all new, and they're like, well, hey, you got the money, you rented the studio time, and da da da, and you got the cloud, and they had to go along with that. So of course, when they went when they went on tour, it was on, and you heard about the rivalry between the Revolution and the Time,
yeah,
because once again, that quote unquote that heated competition, and
yeah,
and it's a good thing because that means everybody bringing their A game, and then who benefits is the fans, the customers. We benefit because even though it was a playful rivalry, I mean, like I said, they would do funny things and maybe unplug a guitar wire or unplug something like that, and like, oh no, but
But
it was good. It was good. If you look at the competition that way, and I think to a certain degree, Prince was like he wanted to keep it really tight because he goes like, well, they're not gonna be bigger than me. No, I don't want them to be bigger than me because he knew how good they were. Oh, trust me. Oh, Prince knew exactly how good they were,
right,
and it was
but
that reign of control. So
right, but this is what ended up happening though. It became more of a thing to where he knew, but once I think the reality hit him in the face was the fan reaction. Because remember, this is pre-Purple Rain, so it's not it's not 60-40 or 80-20, white people, black people in the audience. This is where it's 60-40 the other way. And a lot of venues it's 90-10 or 95-5.
right,
And granted, for those of us in the know, where I think with me starting with Dirty Mind was looking at Prince was somebody that was, especially by 1999 anyway, this was somebody that was definitely in a class by themselves. It went from like, okay, let me buy this Prince album, let me buy this Shalimar album. Here, let me go listen to Cameo, let me go listen to Stevie Wonder.
right,
By Purple Rain, it just switched to, oh, let me get this Prince album, let me get this Time album, let me get this Apollonia 6 album, let me get this Sheila E album, oh, let me get the family over here. And everything else kind of almost became secondary, musically at that point.
right,
So when you got the Time, the original seven, they're opening up the venue. First you have Vanity Six, then the Time steps on stage. Then we're familiar with, Get It Up being on black radio constantly,
right,
Cool being on black radio constantly, 777, The Walk, black radio constantly. Now we're seeing them on Soul Train. We, seeing the Time on American Bandstand now. And then when they go to these venues, then you got the press that's like, yeah, well, Prince, yeah, he's bad, he's great, but did you see the Time? And that was the reality when
right.
we're in this, the people in the stands are screaming for the Time,
Yeah,
and it's like Prince comes out and it's like, no, the Time already wore everybody out, and it's like, okay, Prince, yeah, you got to bring your A game now to keep everybody interested.
exactly.
And I
Yeah,
think in a post Purple Rain world, there's a lot of people that have a hard time understanding why, in other words, it's when it comes to this show, why we keep talking about this band, why we feel, they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll touch on that in a
yeah.
minute.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just that you have to forget about, or realize that there was this world that existed prior to Purple Rain. And
Right.
the Time were a major part of it. And like I said, there was a lot of this stuff we didn't know. We knew Morris Day played drums, kind of at some point. Yeah, Morris was in Grand Central with Andre and Prince.
Right.
And from my standpoint, it's like, oh, okay, Morris Day's a drummer. But now I understand Morris Day is a drummer. His musical vocabulary, his musical knowledge, his instincts, his technique.
Right.
Yeah, he should have been in the revolution day one, along with Andre.
Yep.
It should have been. But we get it. Prince was trying to go for more Sly and the Family Stone effect
Right.
than trying to have, the biggest black band on earth. So we get that. We understand that. But like I say, just kind of, reading Morris's book, the way he talks about drums, other drummers, his influences,
Hmm.
certain albums that I never would have imagined Morris Day being into, like Frank Zappa's Apostrophe.
Hmm.
I'm like, what the what? He's in the Frank Zappa. What, Morris? But I think we talked about this the last time you were on about giving things a chance, or kind of having an open mind towards
Right.
things.
Right.
And like I said, if anything, this particular period, understand this is our understanding of what was going on. We didn't know all these things then. We just knew that this was a very funky band. And like I said, a lot of us that grew up in certain communities, it's like, yeah, Prince was the man, but he was deep. But it was kind of like, I don't know, it was almost like a Black David Bowie kind of a figure, where it's like, okay, he's in this class by himself, and he's gonna do stuff that's to the left. And a lot of times we either took it for granted or we were totally blown away by it. But at heart, we were still, deep soul, deep funk, you know, deep, hip hop was coming into play at that point.
Hmm.
So anything that we could look at and identify with, yeah, they were relatable. So it was easier for us to get drawn in more.
Right.
And I think we already kind of touched on the effects of, say, the What Time Is It album. But for me, just to kind of, switch gears and go into that album real quick, that was the one I think for me solidified, uh, I don't know, probably the beginning of the solidification of my deep fandom into Prince. It's that was the album I think that really I was so inspired by it musically. Their funk, their style was taken to the next level. It kind of cemented the whole Morris Day persona.
Oh yeah.
I think, where the first album was like, yeah, it was funky, but then I know I was saying in the symposium when we talked about the first time album that, you had other bands like the Bus Boys, Kid Creole, and the Coconuts. And I think they were kind of competing on that level with After High School. This album, you had One Day I'm Going to Be Somebody. Again, that was sort of that record to kind of compete with that market. But yeah, this is definitely a next level album, which,
Hmm.
it's weird. Again, we talk about this pre Purple Rain world. You know, as blown away as I was by that album, I think upon that realization, I was ready for the next one. Little knowing that, Jam and Lewis would get fired by the next year.
Right.
There would be this movie called Purple Rain, and Jam and Lewis would be big. There's these other people in the time now, and but
Right.
bringing it back to 1982 and into the summer of 1983 with What Time Is It? And I think later I bought Vanity Six. And then by the time we just had 1999's anniversary just about a week ago, that was sort of that peak moment to where, Prince was still underground, the time was still underground, Vanity Six was, it was all underground. And it was like, again, it was a thing to where this music, it was funky, it was creative, it was on a whole different level, but it set itself apart from everything else that was on the radio at that point. And I think really it was just that period and that mystique and that myth that I think inspired me more than anything to where, like, okay, yeah, let me examine this music thing a little bit more seriously. Or even beyond music, it influenced the way you thought, it influenced, some, again, maybe trying to dress like the time. We hadn't gotten to Miami Vice wasn't out yet, but but just kind of finding, your own identity. I think that's what it was. It was trying to create a persona and an identity for yourself to where, like, okay, these guys are funky and they make great music. So how can I express myself either musically or creatively, whether it's photography, music, art, whatever? How can it inspire me to do my own thing and, like you said, be more influenced rather than just blatantly copy somebody? And
Right.
definitely, What Time Is It was definitely the album for me. That was when, at that moment, the time became my favorite band of my generation, period. I call the Family my other favorite band, but we know the circumstances that led to that, and they created something that was on a whole nother level too. But
Right.
yeah, but this was the album that did it. And Wild and Loose. to this day, put that on and I still feel the same way as I did in 82,
Right.
late summer of 82. This album, um, didn't, let's see, I had a job that summer working in the library, but got fired from it. So I was kind of just relying on lunch money, that going into the next year of high school. And when this album was coming out, and since I didn't have a job and couldn't cut enough grass to get an allowance or whatever, but I would put myself on the Hostess cupcake diet. So instead of buying lunch, which would be like a burger or something, whatever they had, whether, I think that was the standby, but
Right.
I think they had specials of the day. I can't remember. A lot of it I didn't care for. So I think I just mainly stuck with the burger or whatever and whatever else came with it. But to save up enough money to get this album, no, I didn't buy lunch that week. I just bought Hostess cupcakes, which were like, I think maybe quarter or 50 cents or something. And the rest of the money I would say, just pocket it, just save it. So by that end of the week, I have enough money to afford to get that Time album. And I did that with the Time, I did that with Vanity Six, and I did that with 1999. After that, I was able to kind of be able to afford a more, you know, affordable lifestyle to where I didn't have to starve to
Right.
or, beg somebody like, Grandma, can I have some money? Or wait till a birthday or something like that. So yeah,
Right.
that's why this album will always have a special place. I'll probably just end up talking about the walk real quick. Listening to that recently, I go back to, I guess, one of Prince's final interviews, or close to one of his final interviews. It was done by Miles Marshall Lewis for Ebony Magazine, and Prince was talking about the Time. He was talking about the walk and how it was Morris on drums, Prince on bass, and how they would just create the groove and then
Mm.
just build it with the keyboards and then the guitars and everything else later. And he mentioned how, like, yeah, that's a song you can't duplicate that. That can't, him and Morris can't go back and recreate that magic like that. Not to say that they can't come up with something funky, but that is, as I mean, I enjoyed it back then, but after hearing that, every time I listen to it now, I mean, yeah, you couldn't copy it. I don't think anybody has tried to copy that.
Right.
I think, people that have, it was always this, that one classic keyboard riff they would try to copy, or, the whiny voice, which again, Prince and Morris, there was a purpose for that. Where I think other people just thought, yeah, that's the Prince sound. That's the Minneapolis sound. You got to copy that. You got to sound like that. And then they would just get on, let me love you now. And it's like, no, stop, stop. Do
And
not give that person another record deal again.
no disrespect for Ready for the World, just in case those guys are listening. Those, I mean, they carved their own niche too. So no
Yeah, they
disrespect.
did. Don't get us wrong.
But we understand where their influence came from. So there's no
Right.
doubt. Yeah.
Well, I was trying to think of that. Oh, yeah. Apologies to Ready for the World. I'm thinking about that one record, Dream Boy.
Okay.
Don't go. That record.
And
But
yeah, I mean, as I said, sometimes imitation is the highest form of flattery. But when you're dealing with the music industry, then yeah, I mean, it's all about. Once again, I think we've touched upon this on the podcast. You have to keep in mind this is show business. There's a business behind the show. So the record companies have to make their money, and and it's always been whatever's hot this week, we got to
oh yeah,
jump on it right
have
now.
a
Get
thousand
someone
more.
that looks like Prince, or get someone that looks like. And if you remember, because you remember, like Rick James and Prince were in this competition, because remember, Rick James wanted to do an all-girl group, the Mary Jane Girls, and I don't know
Right.
if Vanity Six came out right before them, and then I think
It did.
I
Yeah.
think they did, and like Rick James was like furious because maybe there's it was I was watching a documentary on Rick James, and I guess they were trying to allude to the fact that maybe when Prince went on tour with Rick James, because they said that Prince was just rocking the house. It's so funny. That's how karma usually goes, because and the opening act is just. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. Remember, we've always This is one
Yeah.
thing you was talking about. Like, if we ever get big, we open up for someone, and we just gonna blow it. We're gonna blow up the stage. I mean, we're gonna make it so good that by the time we're done, they're like, I don't want to see the headliner. I'm good, and that's how you're supposed to. You have that attitude. You go in there, and
Oh yeah.
and then I remember we went to go see this, and I'm not going to say any names because we've been apologizing.
I know where you going.
I'm going with this. So this opening act was all about like, yeah, you came to see her, right? Oh, don't worry, you're gonna see her soon enough. I'm like, dude, what a punk. He did the wrong thing. You the opening act, you better like blow up the stage. You make sure that when the headliner comes out, hey, they got to build a whole new stage because you like blew it out. He's out there like, oh, he's singing his little songs. He's all like, well,
yeah, he was making a good job of what he was doing.
Man, whatever.
Yeah,
I lost all respect. I'm like, dude, are you serious? Are you serious? Going to think, hey, you guys are really here to see the opening, the headliner act, right? That's right. Yeah, and everybody started screaming. Yeah, everybody started screaming like, yeah, when are you getting off the stage? Like, are you serious? I mean, you're literally committing like career suicide right now, dude. Do you understand what you're doing? You get up there and you rock the stage like it is your doggone house, it's your freaking house, and you rock it. But
yeah,
right. But one thing,
let's give her a real big hand when she comes.
Right. But I know that and you said we're going to touch on the whole time in the Hall of Fame. But the point I'm trying to make is that, okay, so Rick James, had his female group, the Mary Jane Girls, they had Moderate Sex, and then, Prince had Vanity Six, which went over to Apollonia Six. But if you remember, Rick James also had an all-guy group called the Do-Rags. No disrespect to the Do-Rags, but I don't think they had any hits. I can't even name one Do-Rag song. And they were supposed to be the equivalent to the time. But we can name about 8 time songs. I can't name, no disrespect to the Do-Rags. But once again, you're dealing like with, and I don't know what type of musicians those guys were. I don't know if they could have been a group more than a band. I don't know if they played. I don't even really know anything about those guys. But
I think I tried to. Yeah, I want to say I tried to. I think I stumbled upon them on streaming, and I tried to listen to it.
And it just, I mean, did it sound like more like Rick James clones? I guess I don't know. I mean. See, I think when Prince got a chance to express himself, through the time in the studio, but these guys still took that music and they personified it. Because right now you're sitting in the audience and you're watching these guys do this music. Of course, you're going to assume they're also in the studio. They wrote the songs, and you're going to assume. I mean, it's a safe assumption. There's nothing wrong with assuming that. But they were able to personify the music that Prince and Morris did. And I don't know if groups, for example, like the Do-Rags, and once again, no disrespect, I don't know if they were able to personify the Rick James music, because I'm pretty sure they were almost a clone of Rick James is what I can think. At the time, he was not a clone of Prince. This is how come I was shocked when you told me, hey, these guys are out of the Prince camp. I'm like, no, they're not, because they're not in, high heel boots and, and bikini underwear. They can't be part of Prince's group, because, everyone in the Prince group dressed the same. Well, come to find out, no, these guys are completely different. Well, they personify the music, but it was actually, and then when I found out later, there was actually Prince doing the music. I'm like, holy crap, Prince actually did this? Yeah. This is his music? Like, wow. I mean, it really took, I already was just, I was a fan, but it took it up to a whole other level that he was actually, doing this kind of music. And it's like, wow, this is even that great. So, for the people, right. And I think you mentioned the people who said, well, the time should not go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because, Prince did all the music. Well, studio wise, yeah, but there's also still a persona. You have to understand one thing about, quote unquote, one thing about, the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One thing about being quote unquote a rock star is persona. You gotta have that energy. You gotta have the persona. You gotta have that swag. You can have some really good music, but you need that, as they say, that star factor, that oomph. You just need something that's like, unless you can be, someone like Bob Dylan who's maybe not jumping up and down on stage and doing backflips or anything like that. But the music still has a
But he
powerful.
had a yeah, he had a huge impact.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we're
But
okay. Yeah, let's go into let's go ahead and go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we'll pick up on the kind of because the time and what time is it to me, and in regards to the original seven, I think those are the most impactful of the catalog. I mean, we'll still touch on the remaining albums, but I guess why we're having this conversation is based on the foundations of those first two.
right.
And yeah, when it comes to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, yeah, you get a lot of critics that say, well, Prince did everything and he's already in. And you either a lot of people aren't really paying attention to what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really is, or they're not listening to based on the research that I've done about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's like this. It's like I know there's some that argue well just Jam and Lewis should be in and not the rest of them. But when I don't know if it still comes on HBO or not, the ceremony, but
Mhm.
wherever they broadcast it or whenever they, every year they announce the nominees, those are the what they call the performer category. And to me, I think they should change the name and call it the legends category because that's basically what it is.
Mhm.
At the same time, deservedly so. Yeah, these legends deserve to be in there. But at the same time, there are categories to which, yeah, I do believe that because of their impact on funk, they were doing some new wave too, and it did have an impact on other musicians. Other musicians were influenced by that. And just on that category, their stage presence, their musicianship to elevate
Right.
material that, yeah, I mean, what Prince did on those first two albums, whether, Morris Day is on drums for 80% of it. Yeah, that's phenomenal stuff. Like we said, The Walk, nobody can copy that record.
Right.
And if you listen to their catalog, it stands out. I don't think, it's not as big of a hit as I would say 7779311. Other people would focus on, say, Wild and Loose or Gigolos Get Lonely Too. I know one of my personal favorites that I think only myself and I think maybe the people I was on the symposium with, Michael Dean, Ricky Wyatt, I Don't Want to Leave You. That is the track. That is the track.
Mhm.
And, that quiet little track, if you listen to stuff that Jam and Lewis has done since, they were fired, you hear elements of that, whether it's on Sherelle's record, maybe some of maybe Alexander Neal's first record, a little bit of Janet with some of the Control album. There's elements of that I Don't Want to Leave You that's in those. That DNA is part of that. Whether they played on that track or not, I don't know. But just by that being a time record, and I'm sure they probably did at one point rehearse it.
Mhm.
And if they tried to elevate it for the stage, I'm sure they took those ideas and, like I said, branched off into something they did for Alex or Sherelle or some of the stuff that was on the Control album with
Right.
that. But yeah, but there's a category just by them being the stage ensemble where they can get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. An example, Buddy Holly and the Crickets. Now, granted, Buddy Holly got in as the absolute legend. The Crickets down the road took a few years, but by them being his band,
Right.
they're in there as the Crickets. And the same logic, you can apply that to the time. You can also apply that to the revolution. And yeah, Prince opened these doors so they can have that moment to shine.
Right. Exactly.
And and I think too, what I try to remind a lot of listeners or people that are on the fence, if they're listening to this episode or past episodes, Prince is in the category that few people get to that echelon. Again, we talk about Elvis, we talk about the Beatles, talk about Whitney Houston, talk about Michael Jackson. That's a level of fame and notoriety that, it's, I don't know, it's almost the Icarus effect. Sometimes you fly a little bit too close to the sun.
Right.
But, but for the time, it doesn't make them less relevant. It doesn't make the revolution less relevant. Just because, oh, Morris Day didn't sell, you know, as many copies as Thriller, it doesn't make Morris less relevant.
Right.
You know, Jesse's output, whether the more commercial A&M period, granted he had some R&B hits, and he's also had some success, putting a song on somebody's movie soundtrack. He's had some success and is probably one of the absolute best guitar players on the planet.
Yeah.
It doesn't make him less relevant than Prince. It doesn't make him less relevant than Eddie Hazel or
Right.
even Jimi Hendrix. He deserves to be in that same company that way.
Exactly.
So but and there are a lot of politics in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We get that. Um, Heck, the Monkees deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, based on their impact alone. And they, even though the most of it they did sing on the records, there's some, I guess one of their better albums, they did play on it.
Yeah.
And they had to represent on stage. And they also had an impact. There'd be no MTV without the Monkees, period. But there's politics that every year their name doesn't get mentioned in it. So there is a lot of that, but there's categories for people that never played an instrument, never sang a note, but they're record executives, like your Barry Gordy did play an instrument, but um, David Geffen,
Yeah.
uh,
Uh,
Jimmy Iovine, cats like that. Ahmet Edergan that started Atlantic Records, they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because of their executives, or there are people that are producers that get in. There are people that are songwriters that get in. So there's a category for just about everybody, but they absolutely deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
yeah.
And I think Prince would want that. I mean, as much as he tried to hinder a lot of their success, at the same time, he was also their biggest supporter.
Right. You know, I
It
think,
would
I
come.
think, yeah, I think, like you said early on, I think there was a little ego involved, but I think as we evolve and become better people, you're right. I can see Prince really wanted to see, especially the time be inducted. Um,
Mm,
I mean, I'm pretty sure they go back to their younger days, and obviously Prince is like, hey, it's my studio. I booked it. I play the instruments and I write the songs. He probably
mm.
wasn't thinking long term. He wasn't thinking, one day I'll be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're just kind of living for the moment.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You're not
Yeah,
really
it wasn't
thinking.
even around then. I don't think.
I don't think so. I don't know. So I mean, and that kind of things. But as he has, evolved and grown, yeah, I don't think Prince would have any objection to that. I mean, he knows how talented these guys were. He knows hands down. And I'm pretty sure he probably looked at Jesse to a certain degree as a threat. Like that dude is bad on the guitar. And obviously
Yeah,
Prince is no slouch either. And but sometimes we ourselves are our worst critics. We tend to kind of compare ourselves to other people, and we're like, oh man, that person can do it, almost better than me. But you're right. I think Prince would, give a yes vote and say, hey,
yeah,
uh, but as you stated before, there are politics involved, and you just one of those things you just got to kind of roll with. But Obviously, if they came to us, we'll give them a yes vote. But I don't think anyone has not. No one's knocked on my door and said, "Hey, can we get your vote for the time to be inducted?" So
I know. Yeah, I'm waiting for that phone call. It's like, yeah, Richard, this year's nominees. Who? Any ideas?
right, you know,
But no, I would like. There's a Facebook page called "Induct the Time into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." Um,
oh really?
like I said, yeah, I'd like to reach out to those folks. If you guys want to, I don't know who the administrators are or anything, but yeah, if any one of the administrators, if they want to come on, if they have any more inside information or some ideas of how to, I've shared episodes. I've done a Time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame special that's on YouTube, and I've shared that. So I know that the Time are aware of it. Or they're probably, yeah, Richard, that crazy person, but yeah, good idea. But in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's like, who's this Richard guy? What is he? But like I said, if there's a way that if we can start a campaign or a petition or something to make them aware of it, yeah, I'd like to have them on the show and see how we can get some ideas out to folks. So
Well, I mean, the Facebook page that you mentioned. I mean, that's a great idea. I didn't know that. I'm rarely on Facebook, so I mean, I would have never known. I mean, I'm on Facebook every blue
I
moon as it
I know
was.
I'm mad I didn't think about it.
No, no,
I
it's a
know
good.
my
No,
my egomaniac. I'm just like
yeah,
the podcast will be enough. They'll listen and they'll make it happen
yeah,
tomorrow.
right. They're beating down your door right now. Richard guy, he's the coolest thing ever. Why not? No,
but
but I
but
think it's
we
a
will.
great idea. So
Yeah, like I said, I like to see it happen, and and the original seven, and celebrate them while they're all still here. Let's celebrate that.
right, exactly.
Yeah,
That's the best way to do things. I mean, they're
yeah,
all still plugging away, still healthy. So
yeah.
you know,
And and here we'll segue into like I said, some of the remaining albums here. To me, I feel grateful. I feel blessed that while there was never a real Beatles reunion. That never happened.
right.
What else? I mean, the Temptations. They lost Paul Williams, but they did with after long 10 years after his passing, they did manage to get back together for a quick minute, and that was something to celebrate for a brief period. But like I said, it never happened again after that. So I feel very grateful that we've had like one, two, three, four different reunions. You know, um, we know what happened with Ice Cream Castles. For me, that album, it's bittersweet. It's a bittersweet album for me, and that's weird to talk about. A funk band, in those terms, but it's 1984, summer of 1984. Purple Rain hasn't even been released yet. I think we've had at least two singles from the Purple Rain album that had already dropped and hit the top of the charts. But it's a year after Jam and Lewis were fired from the Time,
Hmm.
and with that firing, Monty Moore left. I think Jelly Bean wanted to leave but couldn't, and I think it once, but it was still a thing of, well, Morris Day and the Time still exist. It's just not going to have these members that just with under 2 short albums, we had all grown fond of. It was just that magic of that original 7. This thing, this group dynamics. It works best when it's those 7. Just like with the Beatles, it wouldn't have worked if it was John, Paul, George, and Steve.
Right.
It might not have worked. It had to be John, Paul, George, and Ringo to make it what it was. And with the time, it was just the magic of the original 7. I mean, especially once by the second album, we started to see Jerome.
Yeah.
In there, and people can make jokes about the mirror and all of that, but to me, that was the magic of it. That was, Prince saw that early on because they just did it as a laugh during some kind of a showcase or rehearsal. Yeah. And it's like, no, that's got to be part of the act. But in addition to that, basically, well, I want to say he created the hype man, but I think he was an influential hype man, where I don't think you would have a Flavor Flav or anybody that's a hype man for any rap artist or rap crew that was around late 80s, early 90s. I don't think it would have existed. Now, you had Bobby Bird, who was, probably the original hype man for James Brown. But I think Jerome took it to a whole different level, to where, like I said, you would have where the dynamics of a Public Enemy working with the Flavor Flav, or I'm trying to think of I'm drawing a blank. There's others in hip hop.
Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. As far as like, Jerome being that hype man, there's like no one else like that. And I think one of the vehicles that was really that had a big influence on that was obviously Purple Rain, because you actually saw the interplay between the two. And
Exactly.
even throughout the movie, Jerome was like his hype man. So when you look at all the previous hype men, you really don't see, you see what's on stage, but you don't see, well, how are these people in their real life? So one good thing about Purple Rain, they really brought, I think, the movie really brought like a spotlight on both of those. Because throughout the whole movie, I mean, Jerome was the driver. He always opened up the door and,
the valet.
Right, the valet, and Jerome, go get my change, and,
right.
So he kind of personified the hype man to the point where he was almost like a butler. But I didn't look at it it was not in a demeaning way. It was almost like it was part of like the whole Morris and Jerome persona. So they were almost like one. They were like one cohesive unit, even though there were two people. But they were just like this one cohesive unit, and it would be weird to see, like, when Jerome was like in Under the Cherry Moon, it was just kind of weird not to see Morris with him,
right?
And then even when he was in the family, it was still kind of weird to see him, because they both, even it was, to a certain degree, it was weird to even see Morris when Morris went on his solo career, not having Jerome by his side, because they were like this cohesive unit. Right. So, they really took the whole idea of the hype man to a whole nother level, and it was like, we have Purple Rain to thank for that, because, I really didn't know anything about Jerome until actually I saw Purple Rain. I don't remember. I think I seen a couple of videos, but it really didn't have an impact until you actually saw the interplay between these two in the movie.
No, the appearance on American Bandstand. I think that was like early 83, because remember, Jerome's not on the album covers for those first two.
Right.
And I guess the only way you would have seen that dynamic was if you actually went to the concert.
Concerts, yeah.
Right. I know for me it was like I said, American Bandstand was like, well, who's this dude? Like, what's going on? But it was so cool. That was the thing, because it's like the mirror, because I remember like from the stick, it was like, somebody bring me a mirror. And then it was kind of pronounced more on the What Time Is It album. But to see it in full effect, it was like, oh, okay, that's cool. All right. Yeah. Right. Dude carrying around a mirror, and and like I say, like you said, the valet.
Yeah.
But even his skills, whether I don't know who came up with a lot of the stage moves or anything,
Right.
but like you said, there it works with them together when it
Yeah.
comes to the stage moves. And two, there's a little bit of percussive things happening because I mean it's not easy to be able to do those moves and stay on that one. He'll have that little one
Yeah.
timbali or he'll have that one sort of electric drum pad, and to be able to stay on that one, stay with the choreography,
Yeah.
to even work certain tricks with the drumstick, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, that's a talent, that's a skill,
Yep.
and I dare anybody that's not a music, and maybe some musicians that want to just say, maybe clown Jerome or whatever. I dare you to try that and look good doing it. I
I was
dare
gonna
you.
say, and yeah, also make sure that they're wearing a suit. All right. I mean, you know
Right.
how hot it is under those lights, so you're wearing a suit and still make it look easy. You still got to look good while you're doing it. And but
And
see, and that was
go ahead.
the whole persona of the time was that swag. You had to have
Yeah.
that swag to be in the band. You know,
Right.
you
Right.
got to look good. You got to look cool.
Yep. And again, that's there are a lot of great bands, since the time.
Right.
But again, it was just that dynamic. And sometimes even now, even with whatever the current lineup is now, they are able to bring that same attitude, to the persona, to make it work. To wherever venue they go to, people still show up
Yep.
to it. Even though, like I said, it's they don't have a lot of albums in the catalog, but they have a lot of hits, and people still show up, and they still want to hear Jungle Love. They still want to hear The Bird. They still want to hear 777, or even some of Morris' solo stuff, Oak Tree, Fishnet. People still want to show up for that.
Right.
Yeah. And like I said, it was for me going back to that where you didn't have that original lineup. Yeah, it was weird. It was a weird album because I, even listening to it, it's a different album than the first two.
Yeah. Okay. We're speaking of ice cream
Ice Cream
castles.
Castles, right?
Yeah. So yeah, no, yeah, you're right. I mean, I mean, yeah, Jungle Love was, The Bird, those kind of brought you back to the first two albums, but that was
Yeah,
about it. That was about it.
yeah,
And then,
yeah.
yeah,
And I say, yeah, I remember buying the Ice Cream Castles album, and once I got home and played it, like I don't know, Ice Cream, it was very weird to listen to, but for me, I kind of call it the Thriller effect because it's like I couldn't stand Thriller the first time I played it.
hmm
It was like it was just something in me that felt that this album just wasn't working. And then I played it the second time, and I felt like, okay, I'm okay, I think. But that's a whole nother subject on a whole different album. But Ice Cream Castles kind of had that same effect on me, where it was just like I don't understand what's going on. And I think even then, I don't think we knew that Prince had played the majority of the instruments on it
oh yeah,
at
we were
that time. I
still,
don't,
yeah,
yeah,
we didn't know. I mean,
because
no,
otherwise, yeah, because otherwise, I don't think I would have had that feeling. I just would have judged it like, okay, how great is Prince playing at this point?
right,
But I know it took, I know for Ice Cream Castles, maybe upon subsequent listenings, the title track, when it gets into that very funky instrumental groove that just runs out to the end of the song,
yeah,
yeah, then I felt like, okay, that's what I love about that track. And then, like I said, My Drawers, that was another one that kind of took a little time to, like, okay, I'm into that track. Chili Sauce, I don't know. It was like, okay, this is a skit, and it's a funny skit, but I would have rather have had, looking back now, the things that were recorded at that time, like My Summertime Thing and Chocolate, to me, it's like, that should have been on the album. That should have been on there. But I understand now that Prince didn't like my summertime thing. It was Jam and Lewis that campaigned to finally have it on Pandemonium. But but yeah, it took by the time I flipped the record over to Jungle Love to where I felt like, okay, it's the time. Okay, I feel better now. I feel better. But now, some almost 40 years later, it's, I don't know, it's still weird because in my subconscious, I'm still thinking like they played on it. Even though I know, and especially thanks to Jesse Johnson and a lot of his memories about a lot of those sessions, to where, I mean, consciously, I know, okay, on Ice Cream Castles, Prince, how you say, went ham on that, on the music on that one.
Right.
And okay, Morris is on the drums on uh My Draw. So it's like, okay, I understand that. Yeah, it's great, it's funky. But somewhere I'm still back in 1984 going like, okay, here's this dude named Gerald Hubbard playing on it, and he's not Terry Lewis. Okay,
Right.
here's this one guy, St. Paul, but he's not Jimmy Jam.
Right.
And this other dude's not because I think yeah, the Bird, they are playing on that though.
Yeah. The
Yeah, that
bird.
lineup, yeah, they are playing on the Bird. That lineup
Right.
is. But I think I don't know if they're playing on Jungle Love 2 or if actually that was Jam and Lewis on there somewhere. I think there's a version somewhere. If it's not on Ice Cream Castles, I think there's a version that exists that does have Jam and Lewis on it.
On Jungle. Oh, I didn't know that on Jungle Love.
Right, because it's. I think
Oh,
there's like three different versions of it. There's the album version,
right.
then there's the version that you see and hear in the movie,
Right.
and I think it might be an early take with them on it, like right before they got fired.
Okay.
Because I think they're also on my summertime thing. That's why I think too. That's another reason why they love that track, and Prince
Mhm.
didn't like it, which is why it ended up not on Ice Cream Castles.
Oh, okay.
But when they did Pandemonium, and Jam and Lewis was like, "Hey, can we have summertime thing? Can we have that track on the album
Right.
on it?" So yeah, it's a weird dynamic, and again, it's where a lot of this stuff now, whether you're a young person coming in or an older person coming in to Prince for the first time, all of this stuff is now Prince 101 now. Where in 1983, this was our reality, like, oh, this is the band and they are playing on that record.
Right.
And then we find out, 2 or 3 years later, what's really going on. But, your memories, when music takes you back to a certain memory or a certain time period, your spirit is still in that time period where your conscious mind is like, okay, that wasn't what was really going on. That's just how we reacted to it. But in real life, you know, Prince went ham on Ice Cream Castles. Jesse's on the drums on If the Kid Can't Make You Come. The new lineup is playing on the Bird. We don't know who's playing on Jungle Love right now. It's either all Prince or it's that band or it's Jimmy Jam. Somebody's on that record.
Right.
And it's like, your conscious mind and your spirit are still fighting for dominance on, what's going to be the better experience, you
Right.
know,
Well,
feeling
you know
good
what?
or musical knowledge.
Right. Well, and it's so weird that you say that because in this point, this is where ignorance is bliss. Sometimes it's best not to know and sit back and enjoy the experience because regardless, I guess, who played on what, I mean, the music is still good, and you kind of get into remember like the big thing in the hip hop world right now is ghostwriters. People love to,
Yeah.
call people out like, hey, you know what? He didn't write those lyrics. So and so wrote those lyrics. Well, it don't matter. People still like the beat. They like the way that, this particular artist is delivering the flow or whatever. And, and we almost led to believe. That's the reason why, once again, when we saw that very first Time album, we assumed that these guys were in the studio. They wrote all the music. They played all the instruments. We assumed that because
everyone assumes that the person that you see on the front of this album, you know, did everything. But when
Yeah.
when you really get into the music industry, you'll find out that some of your favorite singers are not writing this music. Britney Spears didn't write all of her songs. The Backstreet Boys didn't write all of their songs.
Right.
And sync. But your average consumer probably assumed that their favorite artist did write the songs. So then you
Right.
gotta ask yourself, you don't want to say, well, just because you didn't write the song, I don't like it anymore. No, you just sit back and enjoy the experience. And that's how I looked at it. That even though I know that Prince played the music on those Time albums, to me, it's going to always be the Time. Because when they went on stage, the Time actually had to play that music. And then
Yeah.
at that point, and as a musician, you can go ahead and kind of add your own little, as Morris would say, your own chili sauce to it. You get that chili sauce. And you add your little, Prince. Yeah, Prince, you brought this out, but I'm gonna add my own chili sauce to it. I'm gonna make it a little bit more funkier. And then I think to a certain degree, Prince was like, "How you gonna do my guitar riff like that? Wait a minute,
Yeah.
Yeah, how you gonna switch up on chords like that? Wait a minute, I didn't write it like that." And, Jesse like, and he taking it to the whole other level, and it's like, you're right at that point. Prince, that's when Prince goes like, "I think I just created Frankenstein's monster."
Yeah.
And, I can't have. And you would think on the second album he'll let them have a little bit more creative freedom. But like I said, Morris was in there. But at the same time, you got these guys who are musicians and they want to express themselves too.
Yeah.
I want to write some music, and I'm glad that they were afforded that opportunity. Jam and Lewis, that they had the contact. So when they did quote unquote get fired, it wasn't really detrimental to their career because they already made inroads within the industry because
Sure.
of them being in the Time. So,
Right.
and the same thing with Jesse, he was able to create the albums and the music he wanted to because he was in the Time instead of just starting off cold turkey.
Right.
So for me, I look at it from almost like a bird's eye view, if you will, from a higher perspective, where I'm glad it all kind of came together. And I can't say, well, if Prince would have stayed out of it, it would have been a different. I don't know. It's really hard to say how things would have been because it's just you really can't predict. The only thing you can go with what we have today, and for us, I mean, we have an outstanding band. The Time, to me, the original seven, you got this tight collective unit that when they went on stage, they had this presence. And the cool thing about it, as I said before, when I found out that they were in the Prince camp, but they didn't look like Prince, they were almost polar opposite, but they're in the same camp. I thought that was even better. And
Yeah.
then you take the Purple Rain movie, in the Purple Rain movie, and you build up this dichotomy where this, you got the Time were kind of like the bad boys, and the
Right.
Revolution was still kind of like the good people. But even Prince was battling his own demons, on the good side. But then you go over to the Time, and you remember that one scene when Morris said, how's the family? And then when everyone walked off, Morris kind of leaned against the wall because he realized, like, that was pretty messed up what I said. So
Yeah.
that Morris, even though he was quote unquote the bad boy, but he still had this sensitive side where it was almost like yin and yang.
Mhm.
There were no absolutes in this movie, and the movie portrayed it like flawlessly. So for me, it was kind of like, I know you really get deep more into it because you're the one who kind of really brought me on board. But for me, I just kind of look at the experience like, you know what, I like the way this music goes, and so I know part of me knows that Prince plays the instruments, but I know when these guys went on tour, they kicked ass, and I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
And then when Jam and Lewis got fired, because I didn't even know they even got fired. Because the only way when I saw the movie, I'm like, wait a minute, who's this new? This is at the Time. Who are these guys? Because back then, news was not so forthright. You
Right.
by the time we got the news, the story was already about like a year and a half old.
Yeah. Oh, right.
It's like, what, they got fired when? Oh, there was a snowstorm in Atlanta. A snowstorm in Atlanta, Georgia? What?
Well, a snowstorm to them, it's like
To them, right,
a dusting of snow is like 12
Right.
inches to us,
right, exactly. And then,
which is 6 feet in Minnesota,
right. So when you look back and say, but had that not have happened, and they would have stayed in time, we wouldn't got, Janet wouldn't be what she. I mean, oh man, there's a slew of artists.
It's a wonderful life, Minneapolis edition.
Right. And yeah, exactly. Thank you. Every time you hear a bell, that's an angel getting his wings. But yeah, it's just so for me, it's all about the experience. And I'm like, you know, in a way, I wouldn't change anything. That now that I know now, I wouldn't change anything because,
Right.
you know, but had things changed, but I wouldn't, there would be nothing for me to compare it to, you know, because let's say the time played all the instruments, wrote all the music, play all the, you know, we probably wouldn't have, you know, Cool and Stick and Get It Up. We probably have, and now I'm pretty sure those songs that we would have had would have been just as funky. But you just, you know,
It's a
you just, it's kind of hard to say how like, yeah, it would have been a hit or it couldn't have been a hit. I mean, things could have, you know, went completely left, you know. But I look back and say, you know, you're right. I may not know who wrote the song. I may not know who played the instruments in the studio. But if the time, if this is quote unquote a time, because right now, if I Google time, it's going to have all that music. So it's
right.
something that you portray to the world that it was the time, and I'm good with it. I can't say, you know, that's, you know, and I guess your proponents who don't want the time to be inducted, you know, they're the ones who are saying, oh, that's not really the time. That's really Prince and Jamie Starr. And it's like, no, dude, because when they went on tour and played this music was actually the time. Yeah, Prince wrote the songs. Yeah, Prince played the music in the studio, and you know, and Prince wanted to run a tight ship because he, you know, there's a little ego involved. It was like, hey, he's, you know, and pretty
Yeah.
sure, you know, he was a youngster back then. I mean, we've all been young, and we've all been like, you know, it's my toys. I'm not going to share my toys with you. It's mine, you know, and you know, and that's how I look at it. I don't look at these guys as not being talented. I look at these guys being phenomenally incredibly talented. So for me, it doesn't really bother me. I mean, I can listen to the first album. Heck, I was listening to, like I told you, Condensate, and now I know that's actually them. And you know,
Right.
but you know, but you know, growth really helps with your creativity. So this is not the same band back in 1981.
Oh no.
You know, and
No.
that's the beautiful thing about it because they've all gone on their different paths, and because they went on those different paths, they were able to make the music that you know they released for that album. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I appreciate the experience, and you know, and grateful that I was able to you know be a part of it, and you know, and for you to even bring me in and say, hey, Walter, you know, it looks like this, and you know, here you do this is what a producer does, and look at the liner notes, and here's the lyrics, and da da da, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, and you know that helped me raise my awareness of music where I was able to appreciate it more. And then I was like, okay, well, Prince played on the instruments, like he really is tough. It really is tough. But then when you see the time, you know, actually perform live, it's like, whoa, okay, they tough too. You know, they can hold their own. So yeah, you know, it's I like it, you know.
Had some technical difficulties on this end, so we got everything back up and running. So the purple police did not shut us down. So, all right, so we're going to wrap this up here. So we were really last kind of talking about ice cream castles, talking about pandemonium a little bit. Like I said, grateful that we've got to witness this band come back twice. So they've come back for pandemonium. Um, just a quick thought about that. Um, the video was it? Yeah, Video Soul, that reunion. Yeah, we were. Let's see. Actually, I had my Aunt Mary tape that one for me because I didn't have cable in those days. Um, but you and I, we were trying to get a song into one of the. It was a local songwriting contest, and it was like you were kind of dealing with some stuff at the moment, and it was just kind of wasn't a good time to, at first, to try to be in a good mood to create music or anything. And the original plan was just to work on some music, and then I brought that tape over, and it's like, cool, we'll just we'll record this song, and then bang, we'll watch this, the Time reunion interview on Video Soul, and it kind of ended up flipping the other way around, where it was like that video kind of brought you out of the funk a little bit and got you into the funk, to where we got the song finished and everything. Didn't win the contest, mind you, but that was good. Actually, but that's another story. Again, we'll do that podcast, The Musical Adventures of Richard and Walter. But other than that, it was great seeing them back, seeing them on Video Soul with the interview, seeing them on Arsenio performing the new music. What else? Saturday Night Live at that point. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I didn't have any illusions that they were going to get back together and stay together. I thought maybe it would last, it did last an album, but I thought maybe they could have squeezed the second one out of it, but that wasn't meant to be.
Right.
But some quick thoughts, Walter, about Pandemonium.
Well, yeah, Pandemonium I liked. I mean, they were back together again, and this time, played all of their instruments. And I mean, Jerk Out, that was just, it, looking at the video, I'm visualizing the video, and that swag was back. It was just like, and it was, with the time, it was always that too cool, that swag, that, that confidence. Like, yeah, we're doing anything we want to do, and we're looking good while we're doing it, and we just don't give a care. And I was excited. You had the original 7 back, after Ice Cream Castles, which came out, what's that, 83, 84 was when, and then I think Pandemonium came out in 90 or 91?
90. Yeah, 90.
90. All right, so you're looking at, what's that, 6 years later from 84. And so we had to wait a long time. But it was so cool because when these guys came back, you were just kind of curious to, see the dynamic, because at that point, Jam and Lewis were like blowing up. So now you got
blown up. Yeah.
Right. You got these two mega, super producers actually kind of playing almost like a background role. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how long is that going to last, and you just kind of wonder if I don't think egos were involved, because I'm glad they got back together again and did that album. And I was hoping, like you, they squeeze out a couple more albums. But I think, right around that time, I think hip hop was kind of really taking over at that point. You were kind of, it wasn't that many, self-contained bands, as it were. You had a lot of, I don't know if the boy groups were starting to come in. It was more
the Boys the Men.
Yeah, you more or less have like the groups as opposed to bands. You kind of have, boy bands. I don't even like the term boy bands, because it's not like these guys were actually playing the music. I like boy groups because they were actually just
singing groups. Yeah.
So they were not a boy band per se, and I don't know who came up with that, but that's besides the point. But yeah, Pandemonium, Jerk Out, what, Fishnet was on that? Was on that album? Fishnet was Morris. That was Morris. Yeah, that was Morris's solo. Yeah.
But Jam and Lewis, yeah.
Morris's solo, and for me, it was great. It was like, wow, the dudes are back. We got the original 7, and once again, no disrespect to St. Paul, because I love the family. I really love the family.
Yeah.
Before, once again, you really can't, go to Burger King in pajamas, because there'll be like security, those group of guys over there, and the girl that's in the nightgown, So, but I love the family. But once again, at that point we knew that Prince was playing all the instruments, right, and we know that he pretty much wrote all the music, so we kind of knew it was, almost like a front or whatever. But when they came back for Pandemonium, it was like, they're back. Yeah. Oh yeah, and and everybody looked good. Everybody looked happy. I remember seeing them on the Arsenio, years ago, and they looked happy, looked fun, and it was like, yeah. you know, and I was hoping they stick around a lot longer, you know, than just a one album. But
Yeah,
you
at
know,
least long enough for a tour or something. But yeah,
right,
never.
you know, it didn't you know come to pass. But yeah, I liked it. It was, I mean, once again, that was the cool thing about the time. If you look at the very first album when we first saw them, and you look at Pandemonium, still same group of guys, still dressed in the exact same way, and it was still, you know, it was like, you know, it's not like they came on the album of Pandemonium where, you know, with baseball caps on backwards. You know,
Right.
you know, it was a cool thing about it. They didn't change their image. They always stayed true to what they were. And it's like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You know,
Well,
and
yeah,
then,
it was like
you know,
yeah, it's
and
like
the
that
music
group.
was still the same, right? The music was still the same. It was awesome. You know,
Yeah, I was thinking about ironically the group The Crash. They're originally from here in St. Louis. They started off as a totally different band, went up and eventually got discovered by Jesse
right,
and kind of dropped their first album. But then after a few years, because of those influences, whether it was, New Edition, Boys to Men, New Jack Swing, by the time the second record came out, it was like they had a whole different name, they had a whole different look, trying to copy what was going on. But the time they were able to stay true to that image,
right.
true to who they were. And I don't think, it wouldn't have worked if you're right, if they all came back in, it was big back then. Yeah, like they came back with Raiders caps, White Sox caps, you
Los
know,
Angeles, back in
denim,
The Los Angeles Kings caps.
right, denim, denim prison gear. No, it wouldn't have,
No,
you know.
no, 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 no. No, they came back looking like they did from their first album, and that was always been an image. Even when Jam and Lewis, you know, were becoming, you know, these mega super producers, they always still kept that style, and that was just
Right.
like the coolest thing about them was that, you know, that style was always. Even when Morris went on his solo albums, he still maintained that whole persona of,
Right.
you know, you're right. He wasn't someplace with, you know, baggy clothes and, you know, cap on backwards. And no, he was no, it was always the Stacy's and, you know, the baggies, the pleats, the suits, you know,
Right.
fresh, fly, and clean. You know, so the only time they changed it, you know, obviously, you know, they had Jelly Bean and Jerome had to change for the family because, you know, that's what they had to do.
But
But
yeah, that was still like a
yeah, but when they came back to the time though, it was that
yeah.
once again cohesive unit, and it was like, yeah, even, you know, you look at the front of um condensate the condensate album, same thing. You know, it's, I
Yeah.
mean, looking good, it's still fly, it's still fresh, and he was like, yeah, you know, and it just, you know, and you know, like I said, you know, I know the whole idea that Prince played, you know, the albums and the instruments on the first two albums, but the music's still good though. And when
Mhm.
you think about it, if there was some type of music that you had to anchor yourself to, I would rather anchor myself to those first two albums. And the time will always be forever anchored to those first two albums. Once again, from a consumer point of view, because, you know, the music is actually marketed to the masses. It's not marketed to people, you know, with higher awareness concerning music like yourself or like myself, but it's actually marketed. I mean, because the record company has to make their money. Remember, this is show business. So, you know, these albums are marketed to, you know, the average consumer. And if it sounds good, and if you give me this album or this CD cover that has this group, I'm going to assume that these guys wrote the music and played the instruments on it. And that's a safe assumption. You know, you find
Yeah.
out they didn't, but, you know, for me, the music's still good. So, I mean, that persona at the time, yeah, it just freaking loved it. And, you know, Pandemonium was like, yeah, they're back, and then they were gone again.
Yeah.
It was like,
I
well,
know.
you know, I just got used to you guys being back.
Right. I remember it was I know they had done a Warner Brothers showcase
Uh-huh.
together, which now you can go on YouTube and see that video. You can
Oh,
see
okay,
that
cool.
now. Yeah.
Uh,
But back then, there was no YouTube or internet or anything like that. But there was that, and it's like, oh, okay, so they did this showcase, and you heard they were going to do a tour, and then next thing I read about, they're over in Japan, but it's like there's no Jam and Lewis, there's no Jesse, and I'm like, what happened? And there were some things that did happen, but we won't get into it
Right.
in this show. But the long and short of it is, it did kind of, and then with Jam and Lewis, they were still very in demand,
Right.
highest paid music producers. So
Right.
they probably couldn't commit to a major tour anyway.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it did take a while. I'd say, yeah, probably right before Condensate. I remember like 2007, 2008, they did reunite. And again, like I said, there's a lot of other circumstances that cut short that first reunion. But also, too, for those of you that don't have it, get Morris Day's book, Princely Life and Funk. Get that book. And as Morris says, it's in the book, so read it. So there was a lot of stuff going on, but eventually Morris did put together a different lineup. It kept Jelly Bean, it kept Monty, kept Jerome for a good while. But I guess as the years went on, I kind of got used to that lineup, the new lineup, because I remember we went to go see him, and yeah, well, it was great seeing Morris, and then there was Jelly Bean, and there was Monty, but there was I think the bass player was playing when Morris went solo, so he was recognizable.
Yeah.
Talking about Freeze,
Yeah.
and but it was like kind of that, and even Morris says himself, it was like when Jam and Lewis got fired, he hated when bands changed lineups, and now
Right.
that was something that happened to his band now. But as like I said, going through his journey, and the idea was put forth of, well, why don't you just put the time back together? Even though it wasn't the original members, it was something that he had to make work for himself. But I remember seeing like those first shows, like when one touched down here in St. Louis, it was like, yeah, it was great seeing them in person, seeing Morris Day in person. It was cool seeing Jelly Bean and Monty. But I just kind of had that feeling. 'Cause remember, I kind of managed to work my way up to the front of the stage. And it was you, and we bumped into a musician friend of ours named Michael Coates. He was there, and you guys were just kind of hanging back. I'm kind of made it up to the front, and I kind of grew for a little while, and I kind of just came back with the feeling of, man, it's just not the same. You know, it's something missing. But over time, no pun intended, that lineup, and they've tweaked some members here and there, and it's like, yeah, that the current lineup with when it's Morris Day in the time, it's like, yeah, they can throw down. Is just as funky as the original seven, but we always have that soft spot for the original seven. Because like you say, that foundation of those first two albums, kind of just the having the fortune of when music happens best. When you're in high school. Just the luxury of having that happen, unfold in real time. It means something. And it's like, yeah, and as you get older, as your journey evolves, you understand the dynamics. It couldn't stay the same way forever. In this particular case, in order for us to enjoy Morris Day, still walking the planet, and still being able to ask that musical question, what time is it? Then it's like, yeah, these are the pieces that keep it going. So, props to Freeze, um, props to Tori. There's a keyboard player. He's from here. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, so forgive me. Um, but yeah, they're keeping it going. They're keeping the legacy alive.
Right.
They've done a couple of things. I wish they would be able to do a whole album with that lineup, but just the few things that they've been able to do that I've heard, like I said, I enjoy it. It's good. No, it's not the original time. No, Jam and Lewis doesn't have it. They don't have anything to do with it. But or Jesse doesn't have anything to do with it. But the stuff I've heard, it's funky. It kind of bridges some hip hop. There's a track that they have with E40 that I like. So it's good. It's good stuff. And like I said, they're keeping that legacy going. But around 2007, 2008, uh, they got back together to do the original seven, got back together to do a residency in Vegas. And I think they played some other cities also. And I hate that I wasn't in the position to see them in Vegas or wherever else they were playing. Because again, that same excitement, just like Pandemonium, it's like, oh, the original seven, they're back. And then this time they're like, oh yeah, well, we're gonna do an album. Like, they're gonna do an album too. So maybe finally we were gonna get this thing that was gonna last, but it just ended up being just the Condensate album. The tour never happened.
Yeah.
Jesse couldn't wait for things to come together on that end, so he took the job with D'Angelo. And you got to respect that. It's like, Jam and Lewis, they're comfortable, they're okay. Morris has the niche with the current lineup, so yeah, he's good to go. And I'm not saying that Jesse's broke or homeless or whatever. He's doing very, very well.
Right.
But like I said, it's like you say, like I say, it's show business and not always friend business.
Yep.
But guess what? Even despite all of that, they've come back together for a couple of things. They came back together to do a tribute to Prince with Bruno Mars on the Grammys, and that was funky.
Yeah.
It was something else too. I think Soul Train or something, but I don't think Jesse could make it for that one. Not because he didn't want to, but other things. But still, who knows? But getting back to the Condensate album, it was like, cool. I missed out on that tour or that Vegas residency, but here's a brand new album. It's all them. It sounds great. It holds true to the time sound while trying to do different things. It's a time album, but it's not a time album. They can't use the name The Time, but it's the original seven. It's them playing everything, writing all the songs together. And it should have gotten more attention, but I think again with what we now call branding kind of hurt it.
Yeah.
Maybe certain record label choices. But again, the inspiration for this episode was the acknowledgement that this album is on its 10th anniversary, and it got me to dig it up. I no longer have a physical copy of it, but it exists digitally for me, so I was able to listen to it still, and I enjoy it more now than, and not to say I didn't enjoy it then, but it was the excitement of a new time album. A lot of the songs I like, Strawberry Lake, Trending, what's in the Oh, You Don't Know Me Now, that one. One Step is my absolute favorite cut. Nothing gets me more hyped on a time song than One Step. And I mean, Jesse is clowning on guitar on a lot of the tracks. You got that the two keyboardists, Jimmy Jam, Monty Moore throwing down.
Oh yeah.
Monty also has another ballad, he wrote for Morris on that. Go Home to Your Man, which to me is kind of son of Sometimes I Get Lonely, but hey, it's Monty Moore, man can write some songs. So there's a lot of elements that worked, and I hope it really does get a reissue. I hope they reissue it with the documentary video that originally came with it, the DVD. And hey, if you got one of those Vegas shows, release that, whether on CD or DVD or something. I want to check that out. Or if you got a professionally shot video or recording of anywhere else they were in 2007 and 8, that's where I want to be. So let's go ahead and wrap up our time tribute special with Walter. Your thoughts about Condensate and what can the time do next? Um, what can they do? What can they do?
Well, you know what? My thoughts for the Condensate album. You named some really good songs. In fact, I still have my physical copy, so I can actually. I'm looking at it right now. So, uh, you're right. I mean, Strawberry Lake. When I first hear that, it kind of reminds me of Slide and Family Stone. It has that good
Yeah.
feel to it. Trending, you're right, is a favorite of mine. Uh, Actually, I like Sick, but I was listening to Toast to the Party Girl, and that's when they kind of take you back to church. And when it just that has like the best elements of the Minneapolis sound, and you just kind of going back to church on that one. They had some elements of some
Yeah.
gospel, some the Minneapolis song, but my ultimate favorite on this particular album is Hey Yo. I mean, I think I played that like 3 or 4 times back to back. And I was just like, and it's so odd because like back when I listened to this, years ago, I don't really think I even had a favorite song. I was like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, okay, that's not so bad. Yeah, because back then it didn't hit me like it did the first 2 albums. But it's so odd that now sometimes, I think we should give, especially when it just comes to music, not people. Sometimes you can give people second chances.
Yeah.
But when it comes to music, let me make a distinction. Sometimes when it comes to music, sometimes it deserves a second chance, a second listen. And I'm like listening to it. I'm like, man, this Condensate is really hitting me harder this time around than it did a few years ago. And I'm loving it. And it would be nice to do a reissue, and I'm pretty sure there had to be some tracks that maybe didn't make this album, and it would be nice.
There was one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know things I read about I guess the Vegas residency. There was a song called "Stingy," and I
Mm-hmm.
think they have some other songs too. And my guess is that that song, even though I don't have no idea what it sounds like, but if anybody's heard it, comment and tell me what your experience was with it. But I have a feeling that those songs were more like, I would say, I don't want to call it cliche, but they would fit the image of the time or the concept of the time. And kind of based on, I guess, the DVD, the documentary,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of hint at the fact that because they could not use that name, the time, that it forced them to kind of explore other styles of music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, they didn't, do a jazz cut or a country song or anything like that, but it kind of broke them out of that time concept. Like to me, yeah, Trending is the most time sounding song on that whole album. The rest of it, yeah, like you say, Strawberry Lake, it does have that Sly and the Family Stone flavor,
You're
but
right.
then it sneaks in that Minneapolis sound kind of as it jams out at the end.
Right.
And there's a few other cuts that, yeah, you do get a little bit of either the Morris Day flavor solo, or you kind of get the traditional kind of that the funky Minneapolis keyboard riffs that we're used to hearing on it. But I think with the majority of it, they were just trying to do something different and establish a new identity, since it could no longer be the identity of the time
Right.
with that name. So I'm guessing that a track like Stingy and whatever other songs they had prior to finding out that they couldn't use that name, they had to like throw those on the shelf. But I would say, even if you still can't use the name on that, say if they don't rebrand that as the time, because I don't think Prince really had an absolute lockdown on the name, but it would have been ridiculous to try to fight that out in court. Same thing with the family, even more so with the family, where I think, Jam and Lewis would have the bucks to afford a big, huge legal battle, where with, the family or F Deluxe, yeah, it just been a waste of time and money to try to even fight Prince on that,
Right.
I would think. But getting back to the time, I think, yeah, I would release those tracks anyway, just because I think fans of the time would want to hear them.
Yep.
Um, Especially those that went to those shows in 2007 and 2008, that they might have been expecting that on the Condensate album. So yeah, just pad it up with some bonus tracks. If there's nothing else, just pad it with whatever other songs would have made the cut. Do a deluxe version. That's, expanded edition is what they call it now. But yeah, I would like to see that definitely happen for that.
Yeah.
So I guess, well, so anything else regarding the time? Any
Uh,
final thoughts or?
awesome band. And I mean, in my eyes, one of the greatest bands, when and I think the true sign of a great band is when the different members go out and do their own like solo projects and still maintain some sense of not only just originality, but there is still a certain level of success they're able still to maintain, and then come back with the knowledge that they gain or the success or they gain, and they come back together and say, hey, let's put out an album. And I'm glad they came back, for the original seven. And you're right, it wouldn't make sense to fight for the name at the time because, for one thing, Jam and Lewis, I think they're just committed to so much that they have going on. They really wouldn't have the time to commit to a band called The Time anymore.
Right.
And the true Time fans know, we all know who the original seven are, and I think we all kind of knew that they couldn't get the time, but we still love and appreciate these guys for what they've done and the impact they've had, on the musical universe as it is. And they'll be forever cemented, if you will, in our consciousness, with, Cool, Get It Up, and, Jungle Love the Bird. And if you want to go to the Pandemonium, Jerk Out. Now we're starting to remember Chocolate and Skillet. And,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
And, with this album, granted, we have our personal favorites. I don't really listen to radio that much. So I don't think any of these songs were played on the radio. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be
no, just Jerk Out. Yeah, I remember hearing Jerk Out on the radio.
I remember, yeah. I mean, but as far as like on the Condensate album, I don't know if anything.
None of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if anything was released as a single.
Trending was.
Trending was. Okay, then.
Yeah.
Trending is a great song. I like Trending. I mean, that runs a close second with my favorite song because I really like Trending. Trending was one of my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, it sounds like The Time. Even 10 years later, it sounds like The Time.
Right
now, today.
Yeah.
Things are still trending. So yeah, I mean that it was a pop culture reference that was very new for 10 years ago.
Yep.
And it's still part of the vernacular now. And you can re-release that, and to me it still works.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? Even if you listen to Hey Yo again, I feel you can release that today and it'll still work.
Yeah.
So and this album is what you said, 10 years old. So yeah, that's right, it's 10 years old. And that's beautiful that, music from 10 years ago, if you release it today, I feel it will still have an impact.
Yeah. So. And if you look at Morris's solo output now, it's still funky, but it's got more contemporary influence, because I think he's signed to Snoop Dogg's label.
Yeah, he did a song with Snoop Dogg a few years ago.
Yeah, there hasn't been like a full album, but like every, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so, 6 months to a year or so, he would drop a single. I know like a couple of them have been with Snoop Dogg. His latest one I guess a hip hop artist, I guess. What's his
Hmm.
name? Trinidad, I think. But the song is called Head Rush. And I mean, it's contemporary. Again, it's like, it's Morris Day, and you got the Morris Day persona, the Morris Day image.
Right.
To me, I mean, it sounds more, you can hear, I don't know, you can hear anybody from, I guess, like The Weeknd to, some of Justin Timberlake's Timberland produced stuff. You can hear elements of that in it. But like I said, it's all Morris that still comes through. So I think now more so than when he had that one album called Guaranteed, I think he's kind of found more of a balance of, okay, I can be contemporary, but I can still hold true to the funk,
Yeah.
and it can work that way. And as far as the rest of the members, I got Jam and Lewis's, I guess you can call it their first album. We know their track record with everybody else, from Janet to Mariah to Boys to Men to New Edition, SOS Band, Alexander O'Neal, Sherelle. But, they finally came out with that. We've been waiting, 35 some odd years for them to drop their album. They finally did it. And it's a great record. Everything on there you can hear it on radio, or a lot of that would fit in with anything that's on The Quiet Storm. And they're not trying to sound like kids. This is definitely grown folks music. You got Jesse. I was telling you about, Verbal Penetration. That album, definitely, dude, listen to that album. By all means, listen to that album.
All right.
Uh, I mean, I love the A&M stuff, but man, dude, that Verbal Penetration and Bare My Naked Soul, those two albums. Bare My Naked is hard to find. I got lucky. I used to have it, didn't have it anymore. I got lucky and got it for like $15. So shout out. I can't think of the retailer's name. I ordered it on Discogs, but shout out to that person that sold me that copy. Thank you. Because everybody else, they selling it just like a lot of stuff. Madhouse, Jill Jones, a lot of this stuff needs to get reissued because it's a shame. Oh, they want $200 for a Madhouse CD, or
Really?
$300 for Jill Jones on vinyl or CD or something. Yeah, it's robbery, man.
Are you
I mean, great albums. Yeah,
right?
right, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people trying to take advantage of the fan base, not just with Minneapolis artists. It could be anybody that has an album that's like out of print
Yeah.
and is hard to find, and the vinyl copy's not in such condition to where you have to sell it for $5 or $6. But, even by today's vinyl standards, where your average vinyl is, 25 to 30, there's people out here that's just ripping people off,
Oh wow.
by trying to sell something because it's out of print.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so like I said, thank you for selling me that for $15. But definitely, yeah, if I think some of that stuff you can probably hear it on YouTube, like the Bare My Naked Soul album.
Okay.
That one. You said that Verbal Penetration's on Spotify.
Yep. I was looking at it earlier before we started the podcast.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah.
So by all means, check these people out, support them. Yeah, lots of talent. Oh, let's not forget Jelly Bean. He has some
He has a
stuff out.
right. I was going to say I think he has a solo
Yeah, he's
album.
got a solo album out. I know it's kind of hard for everybody to tour, but I think he's with the current lineup of the time anyway. So go check them out wherever city they're in. Check them out. But if you want to support their solo work, he's also starting a museum for the Minneapolis Sound.
Oh really?
So yeah, so I'm gonna
Sweet.
try to get my ducats together and try to help support that too. Yeah, I want to see that happen. And Monty Moore, I know he's had some solo stuff out. I don't know how widely available it is, or if he's working on anything currently beyond, touring with the time. But like I said, all seven of these cats are talented and deserve our musical support.
Yeah.
So check it out. They also deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Oh, I ain't letting that go.
No, I agree with you. No complaints here. Not at all.
Yeah, and looking forward to, hopefully they do reissue Condensate. Maybe, hey, if you guys can squeeze out just one more album. One more. In fact, we're going to end this episode with this thought. If any of you members of the time are listening, I know for a fact that Prince and Jammin' Lewis had toyed with the idea of Jammin' Lewis kind of remixing some of the songs out of Prince vault. They at least had the conversation. Now, that doesn't mean that Prince said yes or anything, or only those three know for sure what was actually discussed. But it is known that that was a topic of discussion. And I know that doing the Condensate album, I know Jesse wasn't too keen on, oh, let's just pull stuff out of the vault like Prince was doing for Pandemonium, just pulling stuff out of the vault and reworking it.
Right.
But these are my two ideas. We're going to end the episode with these two ideas. First idea is go ahead, Jammin' Lewis, if the state lets you pick whatever songs you want from the vault. Now, I know this is a different concept because we're talking about the time. So your ideas might be different. But pick some songs that you think would definitely fit I guess not necessarily the time concept, but if you just want to take songs to show off the time's musicianship and versatility, pick those songs and have that be the next time album. Or you could do this. Pick one or two songs from the vault to do as time songs. Jammin' Lewis, you write 4 cuts. Jesse, you write about 4 cuts. Jelly Bean, you write a couple. Monty, you write a couple. Morris, you write a few. Or co-write, with any configuration. Hopefully there's no egos. Leave the egos out of the room. And just one more. One more album. One more. Please. Just one more. And as the Prince Estate, let them use the name of the time.
Well, is it the Prince Estate that's the record company? I mean, who's the Prince?
It's Prince. Prince, yeah. Prince, Prince vetoed them using the time. Prince vetoed using the family. That's why they had to come up with these names. And we know coming up with a band name is the hardest thing ever. We know. We've tried.
Right. Yeah, it is. Especially when you already have one that's already established. It's like, what? We can't use that one?
Oh yeah, that happened to us all the time. Like, let's try this name. Somebody's already used it.
Right.
And it's not because it was anybody local using it. It would be like some group that, they weren't famous, but they got a record deal. Like they got a major record deal.
Right.
And they were able to put out 3 or 4 albums. They just didn't go anywhere. But
Right.
they would have the name. So
They would have the name.
Right. Let's call the band High Fashion. Up. There's a group that doesn't. They've got like 4 or 5 albums. So Prince Estate, please let the time use the time. Let the family use the family. Let's all make this money together.
Right.
And like I said, those are my ideas. And again, I know the time is hanging on every word I'm saying, and the Prince Estate is hanging on every word I'm saying. My phone is going to blow up any minute now, and they're going to be like, "That's brilliant."
How come we didn't think of that? Who is this guy?
That Richard's amazing.
Hey.
And that Richard and Walter together. Oh, man, they're unstoppable.
Oh yeah.
But what's most important is, what do you guys think? You know, whether it's about the Prince documentary, your favorite memories of the time, your favorite Prince, or excuse me, your favorite time album, your favorite time song. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. And that is going to wrap up this very fun episode of Amari Purple Talk. And don't forget to tune in every week, like, subscribe, download, because that way, like I said last week, we can beat those algorithms. Beat those algorithms. Make this the greatest podcast of all time. We must whoop those algorithms. Give some likes, subscribe, download, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you back here next week. And until then, actually, before I go, let me thank brother Walter Johnson for once again appearing on the show. And again, we will definitely have him back again. I know his schedule's pretty busy, so may not be next week, but we'll try to get you in again before the year is over.
Oh wow, we're coming to the end of the year. You're right. It's already November.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we all got family stuff and holidays and.
Yeah. I'll be back. I'll be back.
Oh
so
yeah.
It's good. Yeah.
I'm trying to get another member of the band on here too.
Oh really?
Yeah, we'll see. We've seen him do a podcast.
Oh, okay.
I've heard so probably get him on here too, and then get the three of us, and then get the four of us, and then we'll get the band back together. But until then, now we will say peace.
Peace.
Keep it on the one. So we're all the purple party people, man.